Hello there, and welcome along to Season 3 and Episode 17 of the Gardener Ben podcast, which is brought to you in association with Peterbilt's Roses, winner of 30 Chelsea Gold medals and creating timeless roses since 1968. Go online and shop at www.peterbiltsroses.com. Well, to say this week has been a frustrating week out in the garden is an understatement. The rain continues here in the UK and it's almost as if we are being washed away. Now here at North Lodge we're surviving very, very nicely. The garden is getting particularly soggy and it's very wet underfoot, so I'm trying to stay off the lawns and borders wherever possible, sticking to the hard standings, patios and drives to make sure that I continue doing little bits of work when the weather allows. Other people unfortunately aren't quite so lucky and there is a massive amount of local flooding. So I'm hoping that you're staying safe, warm and dry while this big bank of weather continues. It looks like over the next 10 days or so we're going to continue to receive massive amounts of rain, so it's far from over just yet. I have, however, managed to get out in the garden and do just a couple of jobs to keep things moving along. I did finally manage to get round to finishing pruning the large weeping willow in the middle of the lawn. I confess that the waste is still piled up all over the lawn, but at least it's cut off and I no longer have to go up the ladder. The willow will obviously, after talking to you last week, will be processed into willow hurdles up in what used to be the wildflower meadow, and I plan to crack on with that over this weekend if the weather holds. I've also updated the Great Sweet Pea Grow Along for 2026, and there are now 4 updates available for you to watch at any time on Instagram, YouTube and TikTok. Just 8 days after sowing, the sweet peas poked their heads out from underneath their lovely compost cat and started to grow away nicely. I've used this as an opportunity, as I now have a little bit more space under the heated cloche, to actually get some early vegetables sown. Things like chilies, aubergines that need just a little bit more time, and some cup and saucer plants, and of course some dreaded loofahs, which are either a great joy to grow or an absolute flop. I've popped these onto the heat mat along with the sweet peas and resealed the cloche to give them a little bit of heat to force them on. Next week I'll update the Great Sweet Pea Grow Along and I'll be moving the sweet peas out from underneath the heat mat but keeping the cloche on tight just to give them a little bit of protection. So make sure that you're saving those videos and you're following along at any time, and obviously if you have any questions don't hesitate to ask. I'm also incredibly proud to announce that I have finally very finally finished potting up all of the roses that I'm going to be reviewing during 2026. I'm in the process of correlating the final lists and getting them set up on my phone so I can start making my personal observations. I've yet to move them all into their growing locations because I actually need to dig up some dahlias before that happens. So once again, there is an awful lot of shuffling about to do here in the garden as there are roses spread out all over. The last 3 finally arrived from a breeder in Holland, so I can get on and pot those up. To my knowledge, there is just 1 more rose scheduled for me to see, but that won't be arriving until mid-March to early April. So at the moment, I can get on and get these put into their positions and start making my observations. Because the weather has been so bad, I've been besieged in the cottage just a little bit more than I would normally be. This has given me an opportunity to do a little bit of an assessment on my houseplants. And I have, after lots of toing and froing, decided to set up several growing areas within the cottage. Now, most of you will be very familiar with North Lodge and the addition that we made to the cottage that replaced a horrible 90s conservatory. That went up in the early parts of 2021, a south-facing lounge with a big vaulted window at one end, giving us 9 square metres of south-facing glass. That particular room is an absolute joy to grow in, and I've packed in nearly 100 house and interior plants into that one space. However, my desire for houseplants continues to grow, and we have 2 very small, comfortable and cosy bedrooms here at North Lodge. Unfortunately, both of them faced east. That, combined with the overhang from the thatched roof, doesn't mean they get a huge amount of natural light. So I've decided to actually install some growing spaces into both bedrooms and allow me to continue to increase my collection of houseplants. I set those up during this week and I couldn't be happier. My houseplant collection will continue to grow and thrive with my new grow lights. I will also be doing something similar in my new recording studio because much as it has a very large roof light in the centre and over 3 windows in different locations, I can still want to add an awful lot more plants to that space. So the grow lights will enable me to continue to grow my space and actually develop my houseplant collection further, controlling the humidity levels and getting some more very, very specific exotic plants, which I'm very much looking forward to. My ramblings about houseplants lead us very nicely into this week's guest. I have been following this account on Instagram for a very, very long time and absolutely adore Richard's content. Today's guest from Instagram is Richard Grows. He has an absolutely vast collection of carnivorous and exotic plants grown in greenhouses, which he shares online. So do head over to Instagram and make sure that you give his account some love and obviously drop him a follow. But I hope you enjoy the conversation with Richard that follows. For me, it was really educational and not a subject that I know a huge amount about. So I sat very, very intently listening to him. It was wonderful to hear another plant collector talking so openly about their collection of plants, and Richard's collection is absolutely vast. So I hope you enjoy the conversation that follows. Today on the Gardener Ben podcast, I'm joined by an account from Instagram which I've been following along for a very, very long time using the handle Richard Grows. Richard, welcome along to the Gardener Ben podcast. How are you?
I'm very good, Ben. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm incredibly excited about this conversation. You and I share very, very different horticultural passions. Tell everybody what sparks your imagination with growing things, and what collection are you sharing online?
Yeah, so for me, I have an obsession, I would say, for plants that are out of the ordinary. So whereas most people like yourselves might be interested in roses, dahlias, for me, I like more strange, unusual, the more sinister kind of plants. So the majority of my collection consists of carnivorous plants. So I have somewhere just shy of 200 Sarracenia, North American pitcher plants. I have around 100 Venus flytraps and a selection of all the other carnivorous plants.
Uh-huh.
But I also kind of dive into a lot of other unusuals that are not commonly seen. So I have quite a fondness for a species called Aristolochia, which you've probably seen. This year, particularly, I've posted a lot of photos of the various Aristolochia that I've grown.
Just
Plants that
you're gonna have to describe these ones. Are these the very light furry ones that I'm seeing on your
So
grid, or
the Aristolochia are the ones where the flowers they tend to they all tend to share a similar structure. They're more or less kind of trumpet shaped.
uh-huh.
They vary with kind of like their, or how can I describe it, kind of their extravagance. So some of the more tropical ones have a great big kind of flared opening. They're designed to attract insects to pollinate them, and they
Hmm.
get trapped inside the actual in the back of the flower. There's like a little chamber where the
Yeah.
insects get caught. So they're, to varying degrees, they come in all different shapes, all different colors, and all different smells as well. Some of them smell pleasant, some of them smell like week old roadkill. But and I, the kind of things that would put most people off. But for me, I mean, I grow a large range of plants just based upon what they smell like. I've got various aroids, the things like your arums, some stapelias, things that are, they emit smells designed solely to attract insects, thinking that
Insects.
they're
So that,
yeah.
there's no flies round you then at home. You haven't got a problem
Uh,
with
absolutely,
mosquitoes or other anything flying
Absolutely not.
whatsoever.
No, not really. Well, actually, joking aside, actually, because they are so good at attracting insects, the Sarracenia greenhouse in particular is absolutely heaving with flies. Not all of them get caught. So yeah, they do always attract it, but they don't always manage to trap everything that's around.
Okay, Richard, where did this? Because it's an obsession. I mean, I don't think I've really scratched it. I mean, I've been following your account for a very yours is one of the oldest accounts I've been following for a long, long time, and I don't think you fully. I get the gist that you don't fully share the true extent of your collections. You don't post very regularly, and you don't post like not in the volume that I do, for instance. Where did this obsession come from? Did it start when you were a child, or is something
Oh
you discovered as
yeah,
an adult?
no, it stems from being a child. I remember seeing a Venus flytrap on TV.
Hmm.
And I absolutely, I want, not so much that I wanted one, I wanted to see one in the flesh and see what it was like. And that, I think my parents were, they had no interest and they had no interest in plants. So we never visited garden centres or nurseries or anything like that. So the odd one that we may have gone into, like we could have gone into Home Base and they had a little house plant section or something like that. They just never had them available. So
Hmm.
as time went on, the more time that I had without having a Venus flytrap, the more the obsession grew to the point where as I started looking them up in books, I'd go along to the my school library. I was borrowing books there,
I've got I've
looking
got
at.
visions of a young Richard underneath his duvet with a carnivorous plant magazine and a torch late at night.
But you're not too far wrong. That's literally how far it went. I was borrowing books from the library. The librarian at the school I went to even had her own book back at home about carnivorous plants that she lent to me, and that was when I actually learned there was more available than just the Venus flytrap.
Okay.
And so for years and years, I always wanted one, didn't have one. And then
So
one day,
so where did you find? I think you're leading us there, but where did you finally manage to get hold of one? Where did you manage to purchase
yeah.
your first?
So along basically, we had a neighbour, and they were quite heavily into gardening. And at this point, I'd actually started collecting cacti. I think with the obsession of wanting the Venus flytrap, it kind of grew me, got me a little bit more interested in other plants, and I started, like many people do, collecting cacti and succulents.
Hmm.
And they were really nice people. They were always coming back with little bits that they'd picked up from like nurseries and garden centres. And one day, she peered ahead over the fence, saying she'd got something for me, and she handed me a little Venus flytrap.
Oh, lovely.
Um, and I remember being really, really disappointed because in my head, the Venus flytrap should have been about 3 times the size, and it was tiny.
It's little 3 inch pot and probably only
It
about three
was,
or 4 inches high. Yeah.
yeah, but I had it. I had it for a good few months, and I loved it, and I killed it, as I think most people do. And it kind of stemmed from there. Even after having that first one, and then I just wanted to know how to grow one and take it from there, really.
Yeah, because I think you knocked it quite. You're very honest there. Most people, including myself, has had a Venus flytrap, and I would say that 99.5% of gardeners that have a fly, or anybody, will kill it really quite quickly. They're not easy to keep. So how? Well, first of all, I want to know. You can be honest with me. You're just between friends, and this is a safe space. How many plants are we talking?
With what? Sorry.
How many plants are we talking? How many have you got? Do
What
you
Venus
even know?
flytraps?
No, in
Um,
in the collection, because there's more.
oh, you
We're
mean
going to talk about
all?
your setup in a minute, because there's more than one greenhouse I'm aware of.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I wouldn't even. I couldn't even hazard a guess. I mean, it's kind of a lot of my plants actually grow outside in the summer, and then they're overwintered
Yes.
because they're able to die down. I can chop them all back and make space for them under the staging. So I mean, there's got to be somewhere in excess of what, 700 plants, something along that kind of
Wow.
line.
Wow.
So
Again, I've seen they seem to be all labeled. I mean, are you going as far
yeah.
as cataloging these things? Have you got sort of a little book that you're keeping a
You
record of
know,
what
I
you've got?
I used to in the early days. That used to be something I had to write. I used to write everything down in lists, long spreadsheets, and everything. But I think as time's gone on, because I have so many plants coming in, and some come in, some go. I keep some alive. Some are, I buy them on impulse, and they don't do so well. So I kind of stopped really making all the lists about them. I do like to have everything labeled up in the pots. That's a bit of um, a thing. I have to have nice tidy labels, all the labels facing the right direction, and everything clear. But I don't really catalog them anymore.
Okay.
Not like I used to.
Okay, I mean, I must admit, I'm quite the opposite way around. When it comes to roses, Mark, my husband, is really funny about the labels. He hates the labels in the garden, so the labels come off, and I have to commit to memory where a particular plant is. But then I've got lists and lists. I've got 320 odd roses that I've reviewed on my phone, and each one has its own note section on my phone. Each one has its own album on my phone with up to 300, 800 images on them. Obviously on my YouTube channels and stuff, everything is catalogued. So I'm doing it a little bit backwards to you. You're labeling the
Yeah.
plants themselves, and yeah, my husband used to would go around cutting all the labels off of things with me, going, no, don't do that. I have no idea what that is otherwise. So very rapidly you have to remember where things are and what you did with them. Otherwise, it gets lost.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we spoke. I mentioned very briefly a second ago. The plants that you're growing are obviously very specific. They require very specific growing conditions. What's your setup like? Because as I say, there is more than one greenhouse, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I've got three groups. Two of them are just regular 10 by 6,
Hmm.
and I've got a very small one right down the bottom of my garden, which is a 4 by 6. Um, so one greenhouse completely houses my Sarracenia collection.
Yeah.
So the staging on there, and I mean it's full to the brim. I use square pots, and there's not an inch of space between any of them. That's now completely full. And a similar setup for the other greenhouse, but that houses the plants on the staging are the carnivorous plants that are grown in water trays, with other plants I grow. As I said earlier, a lot of them are moved outdoors for the summer period, or a lot of them grow on the floor underneath the staging where they actually do quite well in there. So yeah, they all go. Everything else grows on the floor, doing their own thing really.
And do you sell any of these plants, or are they simply just for your enjoyment?
I don't really sell them. I mean, I think after the change and with the requirement for plant passports,
Hmm.
I used to sell them, but I think it's just a little bit too difficult for an individual to keep on top of. A lot of the carnivorous plants I attend a few meetings each year. I'm lucky that I live close to a person who has his own open day every year. So it attracts a lot of people there. He holds a national collection of Sarracenia,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of people turn up there. So I will turn up there and sell a lot of my excess plants on the day. But that's about the extent of it. I don't really sell them anywhere else.
Giving you a little bit of wiggle room to exchange for more rarer and more odd things to add
Yeah,
to your collection.
to be honest, the Sarracenia collection is more or less self-sustaining. So I tend to exchange, or what I sell goes on to other plants. So I've not really spent any of my own money
Hmm.
on the pitch plants for quite some time. So that's not a bad hobby to have, really.
And do you have to heat the greenhouses during the winter? You said a lot of them live outside during the summer months, and you cut them back. Does that mean they're actually able to take, for instance, the pitcher plants that you're talking about there, and the Venus flytraps? Can they take a little bit of weather, or are you having to heat the greenhouses during the winter?
No, no, and I think this is where a lot of people go wrong with them. So the pitcher plants and the Venus flytraps are actually completely hardy.
Hmm.
They don't do well at all if they're kept too warm over winter. So um, the Sarracenia greenhouse, North American pitcher plants, that is completely unheated.
Yeah.
They freeze solid during the winter,
Really? Okay.
and they come back absolutely fine. Um, Likewise, similar with the Venus flytraps. Again, they're kept in my second greenhouse in the summer where I enjoy them, but over the winter period, I then move those down into the little 4 by 6 greenhouse at the bottom of my garden to overwinter. So no heating there at all.
Hmm.
And again, they freeze solid, and as long as they've got protection from the elements, wind and the rain, they get through absolutely fine. And they do all the better for it. When they're grown too warm, they don't really do well on kitchen windowsills. They it's too warm and they don't get enough light. That's why when you grow them in a greenhouse, they get a lot more of the elements and they just do so much better.
Okay. So we're when they're in the house, we're treating them far too nicely. They want to be cooler, and they want a much brighter light than we can offer in the house.
Pretty much cooler over winter,
Yeah.
and they appreciate a bit more warmth in the summer.
Okay.
They don't like it obviously scalding hot. I mean, I think when the temperatures exceed 40 degrees in the greenhouse, then I have to start adding a bit of extra ventilation. But
Hmm.
in general, the warmer the better for them. They enjoy it.
And how about water? Because I when I had I mean, I'm casting my mind back about 15 years since I last tried to grow a Venus flytrap. It has to be rainwater, doesn't it? They don't like chlorine.
Pretty much. It's not so much the chlorine itself, but it's the other dissolved minerals that you find in tap water.
Okay.
So rainwater is always the best. So I've got a whole setup of several water butts which
Just gonna
last
say
me.
you must be
Yeah.
harvesting water all over the place.
Yeah, I've got several water butts, so that lasts me through the summer okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, rainwater is best. You can use distilled water, you can use reverse osmosis water. It's in certain areas of the country, tap water is absolutely fine. And if you get like a cheap TDS meter, as long as it reads less than 50 parts per million, then you're okay.
Okay, you're gonna have to
Then that's absolutely fine.
you're gonna have to back up here. What's a TDS meter?
So it reads the total dissolved solids that are found
Okay, yeah, yeah.
in any water sample that you measure. So
Okay.
um, yeah, you can take a reading of tap water. Typically, for like around here, it's usually about anything between 150 and 500 parts per million. So it's far too high for
Okay.
using. But certain places up north in Wales, they have water which they can just use straight out of the tap, and it's
Hmm.
great.
I would assume the water down here down south because we're on bedrock chalk would be very very
Right,
hard and
yeah,
yeah
I'd
too
imagine.
much. Yeah, our showers and our glass screens in our bathrooms and stuff fur up with all sorts of horrible stuff.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't be the kind of water to use for your carnivorous plants then.
So out of the entire collection, you've said it's about 700 plants, which is just astonishing. How long is it taking you to maintain this? I mean, your partner knows that you're down in the greenhouse all the time. It's taking up a massive amount of time because this is not a full-time job for you, is it? You have a career outside of this. This is a hobby.
Yeah, it's just a hobby. It doesn't
It's
take
like,
up as much time as you'd imagine. Um, I think because I think it's one of those things where I'm constantly doing it as I go along. I might be down there for half hour a day, and most of the jobs just get done. The Sarracenias take a lot of time because
hmm.
now we get to this time of the year. They've all died back. I've got to go in the greenhouse, chop them all back, and then I'll have to start the process of repotting. They grow so rapidly that they keep spreading out and branching, and square pots become round in no time at all. So they all need splitting and dividing and repotting. So
Just going to say, are you able to divide those as well? So, like much like an herbaceous perennial, you cut it in
yeah,
half or break it down into
yeah,
nodules.
they grow pretty much like your common iris.
Okay,
The
with the
bearded
rhizome,
irises.
yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So the rhizome just keeps growing and splitting, and you start off with one crown. Then by the end of the year, it'll be about four, and then at that point, it's reached the edge of the pot, and the pot starts warping out of shape. And you give yourself about a year, and then you'll need to repot it again.
Okay,
So
so it's similar to an iris rhizome. It grows from the very tips, and the middle dies
yes,
out like it would do with an
yep.
iris, and you sort of
That
have to.
that's exactly how they grow. They look very very similar. So
Oh.
similar growth habit.
You can tell I've never seen one in its maturity. Otherwise, I mean, obviously, I've seen pictures of your lovely plants, but I've never sort of seen up close what they look like in a pot. And what kind of growing prostate are you growing these in? Is it something you're having to blend yourself, or I'm assuming you just can't nip down to your local garden centre or your local DIY store and pick up a bag of Sarracenia compost. I've never seen one myself.
I mean, a lot of garden centres do sell a pre-mixed carnivorous plant compost. It's not really economical on the scale that I do it, so I
No,
I mix my own.
yeah.
Um, at the moment, obviously peat is becoming scarce. It's been removed from sale from a lot of places. These plants are generally grown in peat, but there are a few peat-free mixtures now starting to be developed, which I'm
Hmm.
slowly trying out and moving mine on. But at the moment, mine generally tend to grow in a mix of peat, perlite, and sand. Um,
Okay.
and that does well. I'm now slowly trying to adapt them over. There's a Melcourt bark mix, so it's like composted pine bark,
Hmm.
which a lot of people have had success with. So I'm slowly trying a few plants out with that in the hope that at some point in the future I can go completely peat free.
Because it must be a difficult, because the kind of growing media you're describing there, peat obviously renowned for very stably holding water in a very lovely distribution. It's its moisture content is very very stable. Then you've got the perlite and the sand. So free draining with plenty of aeration. Otherwise, you
Yeah.
wouldn't be using the perlite and a very even distribution of water throughout the media.
Pretty much, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It helps it, stops it from going stagnant and
Yeah.
becoming anaerobic essentially. So, yeah, keeps them growing well.
Okay, so yeah, so moving across to a because it's a hot topic. I was talking to Charles Carr from the Hilliers Garden Centre group about this a couple of weeks ago, and I will be talking to the the Peat Free Association in a couple of weeks about the same subject. Moving towards sustainable, more sustainable peat free compost is really hard, and even from just basic seed sowing from a gardener like myself and planting in hanging baskets and pots, it's really difficult to get that moisture retention. But when you're talking about a plant that pretty much, wants it, boggy, but doesn't want it to sort of rot. It must be very, very challenging indeed. So hopefully that Melcourt mixer is good for you.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of people have had great success with it. I've not done too well with it yet, but that might be that I'm not quite mixing it right, to be
Yeah.
honest. But I'm hoping to obviously fix that in the
And
future. So
have you given the Dalefoot compost a go? That's the one made of bracken.
no, I've not tried that.
Okay, yes, again, I was talking to Kenny, who is the director of horticulture at Covent Garden, and they're blending a Melcourt mix with Delphic compost. Again, they're finding that because they do a lot of sort of plot installations and stuff that sort of last between 6 months and a year. They don't know sort of to need relieve the amount of watering they do. They're finding that blend. I'm not sure what ratio he's blending it to, but yeah, they're using the Melcourt and a Delphic compost together to even out the water distribution. So that might be something you could try.
Yeah, definitely worth looking in further into that.
So, out of everything that you grow, is there a favourite? If I had to say to you, right, Richard, you can only have a handful of plants. I won't make you just choose one because that's just really not very fair for someone who seems so impassionate as you are as you do about plants. Is there maybe five that you could give us that you say, okay, these are five I could not live without.
Okay. I mean, yeah. Obviously, I do have favourites. I think my from the Saraceni, there's a couple in there. There's a hybrid called Praetorian Guard. It has very robust, bright red pitchers. I mean, in the springtime when it starts doing its thing, it's the first one you see, and it just stands out from all the others.
Hmm.
Um, there's a second one called Asbo. Um, yeah, its name is basically it looks like a thug. The pictures are all kind of like deformed and they're big and chunky, and it is an absolute thug. It definitely deserves a name. That is one I
Yeah.
wouldn't be without. From my other plants, Aristolochia macrora. That one crops up a lot on my Instagram feeds. It is one of my favourite plants. So again, this one has flowers that they look like a long trumpet with a lid, and off the lid a long tail drops down. Um, Again, smells like rotting meat, attracts a lot of flies, but I just find it such an amazing plant to grow. One of
Yeah.
my absolute favourites. It's just so bizarre. That was three. Four, with slightly different to the normal potted plants, is actually an aquatic plant I grow. So it's a bladderwort. So it's a carnivorous plant that grows in water, but
Hmm.
it has all across its stems, it has little kind of bladders. They look like little bubbles, and they can actually trap water insects. So when you lift it out the water, all the traps go off and it crackles as you pull it up. It's quite
Oh,
satisfying.
yeah. Just gonna say, that sounds. It's one of the kind of things that would pique my interest. Yeah.
And for my final plant, you know what? I think it's so common, but it's so satisfying, and it would be the sensitive plant mimosa.
Okay.
I just think I think it's just an amazing plant. Even now, I'm in my forties, and just to be able to touch a plant that reacts so fast, I just think it's an amazing thing.
It sounds like your imagination was captured at a very early age, and it's grown and grown and grown. It's wonderful. I've got a feeling your YouTube, sorry, your Instagram feed is going to be lots of people are going to be heading for it after they listen to this episode because you're mentioning lots of names that again I have a very very basic knowledge of what you're talking only because I follow and I've seen, but I think there's going to be lots of people looking at things and sort of going through your grid and going, oh, okay, that's what he was talking about. That's what he was talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
do any of these plants make their way inside, or are they strictly a collection that you're keeping in your greenhouses and in the garden?
no, I mean these plants generally tend to stay in the greenhouse garden. There's no room on the windowsills in the house for other plants because that houses a Hoya collection that I've got. So something a little bit more mainstream ish, but grown more for their beauty than their weirdness.
Well, I didn't know about the Hoyas to be honest with you, because I'm looking at a Hoya in my lounge now, and I don't know what it's called. It's a Hoya. It's got long pointed leaves. It's fairly run of the mill. I've killed two of these so far, and I have one now that I've had for about a year now, and it's now
Yeah.
something in the region of about 4 foot drop.
It's a substantial plant, and it's produced. I'm going to stand up and look at it actually because I can. It's produced its first flower, which I am just utterly thrilled about. And we had some company over the weekend, and a young man was sat in a chair. He's only 14, but and he was sat in a chair with his hanging above him, and he kept touching it. And I said, "You're not allowed to touch that." And I scooped it up and hung it in a different way. But it looks like it's going to have about three or four different flowers on it. They're very,
Yeah,
very pretty. But yeah, I've managed to kill at least three of this particular variety. The room that's in our lounge is we're blessed with a huge vaulted ceiling and a
yeah,
massive amount of glass. So the room is very difficult. Everybody said, "Oh, it's very bright," but it also gets very hot. So we have
yes,
to be careful where I put plants in here because some areas, like right over by the French doors, are actually in quite deep shade. Um, but closer to the back of the room, it's baked in sun all day because it's south facing. So I have to be very careful about where I put things. And I think I now have the location of this particular Hoya just right. I don't want to breathe in the wrong direction. I don't want to upset it. So I'm very proud of that one. I didn't know
yeah.
you had how many Hoyas have you got hiding in the house?
Uh, not a huge amount. They're grown up. I've got some 3 in the kitchen, so each one is full to capacity. So I've probably got about 12. I'd imagine off the top of my
Still
head.
still quite a lot for one species of plant.
Yeah, yeah. I tend to go into everything. It's like do it properly. So when I decide I want something, I'll just launch headstrong into it and buy a load in one go. So
There's no, you're very decisive. Once you set your mind on it, that's it. You're off.
yes, definitely.
Have you always been like that, or is
I think pretty much, yeah, yeah. I'll decide on something that I'm interested in, and then I'll just roll with it. Much to my husband's dismay, I think, because he knows when I'm trying out something new, and he knows the parcels will start arriving, and yeah,
again, Mark very much knows where I am and what I'm up to. There's no surprise. It's out. It's roses. It's peonies. It's sweet peas. It's dahlias. Which, yeah, well, different to your subject, but very very run of the mill apparently, according to your specialist subject. Going back to the fact that I've killed several of these type of plants that you're looking after in your collection, can you give anybody, for instance, because these are great plants for getting young people involved in gardening. As you said, they sparked an imagination in you at a very young age. Is there any advice that you can give a parent, a caregiver, a neighbour that may want to buy one of these for a small child, maybe for a birthday or Christmas present, or just just to give them a bit of a surprise? How can they actually look after these things? What's the best advice you can give them?
yeah. I mean, basically, the best place they can be grown if you've got conservatories, large porches, unheated greenhouse.
Yeah.
These are definitely the best locations to grow them.
So
They
not
need
not on the bedroom windowsill, not in the kitchen windowsill, not in the bathroom.
No, I mean that's not to say that they can't grow there, but I've never seen one that's really reached its full potential growing on
Okay.
a
Yeah.
on a windowsill. Sometimes they survive, but they don't thrive.
No, again,
Um,
it's a really good. I always say that in a lot of my videos. I'm not aiming to teach people to get their plants to survive. I want them to thrive. We're giving them the best possible start. So that's a really good phrase. Well done.
yeah. So I mean the starting point is a large tray to grow them in.
Hmm.
So they need humidity, and the best way to do that is they can stand in water, and if you stand them in a very wide tray, that gives plenty of evaporation around them to keep them happy.
So creating
Um,
a little microclimate around them.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. And usually in a sunny position, give them plenty of ventilation in the summer. If the greenhouse gets really hot, make sure that the windows and the doors are open. But they'll usually absolutely thrive and do well in an unheated greenhouse. Over winter, you can let the water dry out. And they will freeze solid. There will be a block of ice, but they will recover the following year. I mean, I've even got some. I've got a few trays that um, house a lot of outdoor plants, like carnivorous plants that are native to the UK. And I've got a few trays of Venus flytraps in there as well. And they're outdoors, and they still come back every year. They're absolutely fine.
So,
Um,
even stood in frozen water, or you have to keep them
yeah,
out. Yeah.
no, even stood in water. I won't say that they do best. Again, they're not thriving in that situation. They come back a little bit weaker, but they
Hmm.
do hold on a lot longer than if you were growing them on a kitchen windowsill. So they definitely prefer the cooler winter temperatures. And as I say, unheated greenhouse is best.
So again, yeah, cast my mind back to the last one I had, and I think I very much definitely put it on the bathroom windowsill, and I did get it some rainwater, but I think it was an east-facing window, which didn't get a great deal of light, so that was probably did for it.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases as well, the compost that a lot of them grow in isn't best. I think a lot of cases, like a coir mix,
Hmm.
they it tends to get quite claggy. Again, nothing. There's no aeration in it. It's quite dense. I think whenever I've bought I'm always on the lookout. Even in garden centres, there might be just something that looks a little bit different to the others, and I'll always repot it straight away into something a bit more suitable.
Okay, and just if you wouldn't mind, is there any particular plants within your specialized wheelhouse? So for instance, if someone, a young person, for instance, or did want to get into, but they don't have to be young, they could be inspired by this conversation we've had tonight, because my mind's spinning with it and I'm excited by it. So if is there is there a couple of plants you might be able to recommend that are a little bit more robust and a little bit more easy to take care of, that might be a good starting point for somebody?
Absolutely. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the common sensitive plant, mimosa,
Yeah.
um, that is an easy plant to grow, and it's now available in nearly every single garden centre. You'll find pots just absolutely full of newly germinated seedlings,
Hmm.
and they're pretty tough to kill. They're a tough plant. They grow well. They grow strong. They can, unlike the Venus flytrap, where the traps will only work a limited number of times. You can just attack the plant as much as you want, make it close up, and it will always recover. And
Okay.
I think that's a great plant for kids to try growing, to see what plants can do and how they behave. I think it's a fantastic one to start with.
Oh, brilliant. That's like I say, because we I mean, we all have to be disappointed sometimes, but there's nothing worse than, I say, especially when it comes to young people when they start out getting, you get them something, and I often say that things like an alocasia is normally a good thing for them to grow, because it gets big and it really quickly, and you get something that looks quite dramatic, like a cheese plant as well. They come on really quickly, and you get
Yeah,
something that's really rewarding. But we all have to get used to the trials and the disappointments. But that you don't want it to be the first couple of plants. You want to sort of keep feeding the imagination before
yeah,
you get too many
definitely.
disappointments set in. Richard, it's been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. I'm so glad that we've had this conversation. Over on Instagram, you're using the handle Richard Grows. So everybody can head over to your Instagram channel. Can they find you anywhere else? Are you sharing on TikTok or YouTube, or is it just Instagram?
No, no, just Instagram only.
Okay, well, I'm assuming there's going to be quite a few people heading over to Richard Grows and having a troll through your grid and having a look at some of these weird and wonderful plants we've been talking about today. Thank you so very much for coming on and sharing your passion. It's made me smile, and I hope the listeners have really enjoyed our conversation too.
No, it's been a pleasure, Ben. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.
Bye bye.
Catching up with Richard was an absolute joy, and finally getting to speak to him and getting to know him better. You can tell that his passion for plants just oozes out of every single pore. And I'm off to the garden centre over the weekend to purchase myself a sensitive plant, one of those mimosas that he suggested at the very end of the conversation. That's not part of my collection just yet, so I think I might treat myself to one of those. I can't thank Richard enough for joining me here on the podcast, and I look forward to seeing his posts all over social media in the coming weeks and months. Getting to talk to another fellow plant collector is always great fun. This week over on social media, I also did a very long live pruning event, which you might want to check out. If you have a large established climbing or rambling rose that you're not quite sure what to do with, head over to my YouTube channel now and watch me do battle with a 5-year-old Bobby James. This is a really big brute of a plant which has been planted in what used to be the wildflower meadow. It has really now got itself established, and last year sent up some massive basal canes, which, because I was busy, is no excuse, but I didn't get round to tying in properly. So I tasked myself as doing this as a live event over on YouTube, and that can be watched at any time. So if you fancy a little bit of a giggle, some awful camera angles, I did manage not to say any profanities or swear words, but you can head over to YouTube and watch that now. Next week, I have the pleasure in inviting onto the podcast Neil from the National Chrysanthemum Society. Chrysanthemums are another thing that I absolutely adore. I seem to have this passion for sort of plants and flowers known from the 30s, 40s and 50s. And obviously the chrysanthemum is still the most popular cut flower purchased across the world. I have dillied and dallied in growing chrysanthemums before in the past, not actually here at North Lodge, but it was something I added to my last garden before we moved here around 8 years ago, with limited success. Way back when I first started my horticultural career, aged about 14, I also grew quite a lot of them as a cut flower, which suffered terribly with rust. My conversation with Neil opened my eyes again to the fact that I need to explore this group of plants further. So, under his advice, I did go ahead and order myself some plants, which should be arriving with me later on in April and May. So I hope you tune in next week to hear my conversation with Neil from the National Chrysanthemum Society. The Gardener Ben podcast is brought to you in association with Peter Beals Roses, winner of 30 Chelsea Gold medals and creating timeless roses since 1968. Go online and shop at www.peterbealsroses.com and make sure that you're following along on Instagram and TikTok. Until next week, happy gardening.